Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and there's no other way to say it other than Shadow Girafarig is broken in the Sunshine Cup. Girafarig runs Confusion, Psychic Fangs, and Trailblaze, and with the better energy generation that Confusion got last season, Girafarig just completely runs away with endgames. Unfortunately for me, Wigglytuff is the best core pairing with Girafarig as Wigglytuff annihilates Furret. So even though I hate Wigglytuff, I'm going to make a one-time exception and actually put it on a team. For the save swap, initially I used Furret, but ended up switching to Oranguru, as Oranguru was more consistent at baiting out opposing Furrets. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1 we're off to a terrible start, leading Wigglytuff into Colossal. I save switch into Oranguru, my opponent responds with a Bubble Ludicolo. Bubble is the fast move you want on Ludicolo in this meta because there are so many normal types. And normal type double resist Astonish, meaning Ludicolo doesn't really have fast move pressure. But with Bubble, Ludicolo actually gets fast move pressure into the normals and can be a pretty significant nuisance. Brutal Swing is going to be shielded up by my opponent, and I'm more than happy just to let the Oranguru go. My opponent didn't have a great answer to Confusion, so I can farm down with Wigglytuff and trust in Girafarig to close out the game. In comes Colossal, I go Girafarig, in the back they have Lurantis, and this is looking like Girafarig's game to win. I'm not going for the Psychic Fangs, I'm going for the Trailblaze. Neither move would knock out, but Trailblaze means that I'm going to get boosted Confusion damage onto Colossal. Lurantis fires off a last-second Leaf Blade, back in comes Colossal, and look at the Confusions go. Girafarig farms up to another Trailblaze, going for the Psychic Fangs bait. That gets the shield, and my opponent will go for the Flame Charge. They're hoping that Flame Charge will boost up their smackdown damage and take the knockout, but it does not. Shadow Girafarig hangs on. I make it to a double boosted Trailblaze. Down goes Colossal, and that is a good game. Hopping into the next match, picking up a terrible lead as I lead into a massive core breaker, Wigglytuff into Confusion Victini. I save switch into Oranguru, trying to get to the Brutal Swing, but Victini is already at V-Create. V-Create will connect, big damage onto Oranguru, and my opponent responds with Licky Licky. Licky Licky, gonna be more than happy to absorb the Trailblaze from Oranguru. Oranguru, gonna try and make it to the Brutal Swing, but Licky Licky with perfect charge attack timing will deny the energy with a Body Slam. But back in comes Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is gonna look to no-shield everything and commit to the full Charm farm down. This way, Wigglytuff, it's going to take a lot of damage, but it's going to exit with so much loaded energy. Licky Licky firing off yet another Body Slam. Getting a Bulkymon like Licky Licky out of the way should be helpful for Girafarig, but disaster strikes. Licky Licky survives on 1 HP, makes a final Body Slam, and I lose all that Wigglytuff energy. In comes Girafarig, and I'm going to need Girafarig to pull off a miracle. My opponent waits down the timer, in comes Ludicolo, but guess what? They're on Astonish, they're not on Bubble. Since they're on Astonish, that may be the opening that I need to win this game. I shield up the Weather Ball, undertap the Trailblaze, because I need to boost up my Confusions as much as I possibly can. Trailblaze takes the KO, back in comes Victini, and I'm not even gonna go for the Trailblaze, I'm just going for Psychic Fangs. Let's ramp up our Confusions, let's debuff their defense. Look at the Confusions go! Girafarig absolutely melting Victini. Victini unfortunately has to deal with the fact that these are effectively +3 Confusions. Victini now at the back-to-back V-Creates, but guess what? Girafarig winning charge attack priority with the Psychic Fangs, even losing close to 100 Wigglytuff energy does not matter. Girafarig, with one of the nastiest sweeps you'll ever see, takes home the win. Great lead in the next match, Wigglytuff into Furret. My opponent safe switches into Fearow, and I don't have a great response to a Fearow safe swap, so I'm more than happy to stay in with the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff will shield up the first Drill Peck, return fire with the Icy Wind, and Icy Wind, my opponent, if they don't want to lose this energy, they're going to have to put up a shield. Shield comes up, and now I can send in Oranguru. Oranguru not going to be too phased by a -1 Drill Peck. That does not do a lot of damage. Oranguru just misses the farm down. Man, today was a day of opponents surviving on 1 HP. Their Fearow hangs on 1 HP. They send in Furret, and I'm going to be firing off this Trailblaze. Furret, obviously these sucker punches really add up. Oranguru falls just short of the Brutal Swing, but I can bring back in the Wigglytuff, and I preserved a decent amount of HP on it by protecting it from that Drill Peck. Swift from the Furret is going to land. My opponent sends in their final Pokemon, which is Shadow Toucanon. Toucanon, I'm firing off the Swift instantly. They have 4 pecks of energy. I get the shield, and now it's time to send in Girafarig. Because I threw on alignment, my opponent is now going to get outpaced by the Girafarig. I make it to the Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs easily going to be knocking out the low HP Toucanon, and then I still have a bunch of HP remaining on this Girafarig. Back in comes the Furret, and Girafarig with that 2 cycle is just so nasty. We survive the Sucker Punches, KO with the Psychic Fangs, and take home the win. We move to the next match, leading Wigglytuff into Ludicolo. I'll have to check the fast move here. It is going to be Bubble. I'm going to bank some energy and then send in Oranguru. This basically gives my opponent a free Leaf Storm and Dip, but I think that I actually want to preserve Oranguru, so I will put up the shield at the last second. I don't often shield Oranguru, but in this case, it's really going to pay off as my opponent does not have a good answer. They send in Miltank, but Miltank can't really do any damage neutrally. Miltank can fire off Body Slams, but Oranguru just simply will not care. Body Slam lands. I mean, look at that damage. That does nothing. Oranguru now gets to fire off a boosted Trailblaze, and this is where things get interesting. Not only am I able to get the shield back, but I just don't think that Miltank can knock me out. Miltank doesn't really have a lot of damage output. They Ice Beam, Oranguru survives, and I get aggressive, and I pivot into the Wigglytuff. I've now saved the Brutal Swing for later. If I stayed in that matchup, my opponent was always going to be no shield in the Brutal Swing, and I would rather have it for whatever they have in the back. I Icy Wind the Ludicolo. Unfortunately, Ludicolo lives on very low HP to make a Leaf Storm, and that does some pretty devastating damage. My opponent's going to wait down the switch timer here. They bring back in the Miltank, and Miltank will fire off the Body Slam. It's going to be all up to Shadow Girafarig to try and close out the game. Girafarig's going to be answered with a Wigglytuff, and this is where things could get a little bit tough. Wigglytuff has a ton of fast move pressure. Girafarig is very frail. Wigglytuff will shield up the Psychic Fangs. Confusion is doing a lot, but now I'm going to be at -1 attack. So the question is, can I even knock out with the Trailblaze? I overfarm, getting myself very, very low. I now know that I can knock them out with Psychic Fangs, but I've put myself in a range where I can't make a move into the Miltank. However, that banked Brutal Swing from earlier on Oranguru comes in clutch as we KO the Miltank, and even with a bit of a misplay in the endgame, we're able to take the win. Wigglytuff at a Talonflame, a very bad lead. I'm going to look to immediately save switch into Oranguru. My opponent responds with a Furret counter swap, and this is very okay. This is the team working as intended. The goal is, in a bad lead, you want to save switch Oranguru, try and bait out Furret, and then set up Girafarig with insane confusion damage to sweep the endgame. Trailblaze is going to land. Furret looks for a farm down that they do not get. Oranguru is able to make the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing into the Furret is going to land. Furret gets KO'd, and back in comes Talonflame. Talonflame will be answered with Girafarig. Confusion's adding up, as they will fire off energy. I have to shield everything on the Girafarig, and then I'm going to throw one in the Psychic Fangs. They pivot into Ludicolo. I soften it up with the Psychic Fangs, and the moment I click the Psychic Fangs, I realize I've made a catastrophic error. This is not Bubble Ludicolo. This is Astonish. I could have saved the energy, brought in the Wigglytuff, and just fully farmed them down. But a catastrophic error by me has now put me in a position where I'm probably going to lose this game. Back in comes the Talonflame. Talonflame still has 2 shields to hide behind. I fire off the Icy Wind. Shield comes up. I am going to get some extra charms, but this does not put them into 1 confusion range. So I get the confusion through, but the confusion will not be enough damage. And unfortunately, this was a winnable game, and in my eyes, this was just a complete throw by me. If I just held on to the energy, when I saw the Ludicolo, I just assumed it was Bubble because we saw a lot of Bubble Ludicolos, and if it's a Bubble Ludicolo, I'd want to soften it up with the Psychic Fangs, but it wasn't, and unfortunately, that mistake cost me dearly. Great lead in the next match, Wigglytuff into Obstagoon. My opponent safe switches into Quagsire, and I immediately predict the switch out there because no Obstagoon is going to stay into Wigglytuff, so I immediately safe switch and send in my Oranguru. Oranguru is not behind by a single turn in this matchup. I fire off the Trailblaze and force the shield. Looks like my opponent is going to heavily commit into flipping switch advantage. Them having switch advantage is definitely scary, but if I'm at a 2 shield advantage, then Giraffrig should be able to clean up. Wigglytuff gonna be brought into an absolutely loaded Quagsire, but I'm more than happy to absorb these charge stacks because again, all shields in this match are going to the Girafarig. Quagsire leaves with a parting gift. It's one final Aqua Tail. What do they have in the back? Is it Macargo? No, it's Clodsire. I send in Girafarig. They're going to be sending in the Obstagoon. They did switch fast enough. Big credit to my opponent. They switch fast enough that they are able to outpace. Night Slash will be shielded. The counters do add up, but I should be able to make it to a second Trailblaze, and Trailblaze will easily knock them out. The only thing I have to do to win this game is throw one more Confusion to ensure that I'll be one off of the Psychic Fangs. So I shield up the Night Slash. They get the Night Slash boost, and that loses me the game. Oh no. Girafarig was set up to sweep because this +2 Psychic Fangs would have deleted them, and then I would have got boosted Confusions onto the Clodsire. But unfortunately now, I'm just too low because of the boosted counter damage that I took. Well, the double boosted counter damage that I took. I can't make it to the Swift, and Confusion does not farm down the Clodsire. We move to the next match, Wigglytuff into Abomasnow. Now this is a matchup that is pretty okay for all the Pokemon on this team. I definitely don't mind staying in this matchup a bit with Wigglytuff, softening them up, and then looking to bring in Oranguru. As if they're in Abomasnow, typically they won't have a Furret in the back, because then they would just be pretty catastrophically weak to Pokemon like Blaziken. They're going to stay in this matchup though, firing off Weather Balls, and they actually CMP-tie the Oranguru. This is a little bit tough because I'm going to be very low on the Oranguru, but I know that I can hang on here. So I know Shield, fire off the Brutal Swing. Unfortunately, they hang on as well, and they send in Fearow. Fearow immediately under pressure from the Brutal Swing. This will do about half their HP, and then I switch into Wigglytuff, and I can snipe them down with the Icy Wind. This forces my opponent into a difficult decision. If they want the Fearow, they're going to have to commit the Shield. They do just that. Charms add up quite a bit. And now I'm going to have to trade a shield in exchange for a 1 Confusion head start on Girafarig. So the Confusion goes through, they fire off the Drill Peck, and it's going to be Girafarig versus the world in the end game. In the end game, it's Bibarel, and I can just fast move through this with the power of Confusion. Psychic Fangs does get shielded. This poor Bibarel, look at the Confusions. Confusions are absolutely deleting this Pokemon. They go for the Surf. They're already deep into the red HP, so even if they no-shielded the first Psychic Fangs, then at this point they would have just been farmed down. I go for the Trailblaze to boost up my Confusions to farm down the rest of their team, and my opponent will concede the match. Wigglytuff into Shadow Hippowdon in the next match. This is a lead again where I don't mind staying in for a little bit. Hippowdon will fire off energy. I'm perfectly fine with letting this go, and then I'm going to fire off the Icy Wind and look to pivot. My opponent makes a nice Icy Wind catch as they have an Oranguru as well. It looks like this trainer is well aware of the power of Oranguru in this meta. Wigglytuff is going to farm up some energy as I bring in my own Oranguru. Now my opponent is debuffed, which means their Brutal Swings are really not going to be doing much of any damage. My goal is to try and Confusion my opponent into a range where my Brutal Swing will actually be lethal. So they land that Brutal Swing, I fire off my own, and then I immediately realize I should have done one more Confusion, because this Brutal Swing will barely miss the knockout. Back in comes Hippowdon to be immediately under threat from the Trailblaze. Trailblaze will guaranteed knockout. They put up the shield. Oh my, they did not want to take the Confusions, so instead of farming down, they'll throw the Weather Ball, but this will just set up the Giraffe. In comes Girafarig, we get the full farm down, exiting with a massive amount of energy, and now, what do you send into a Girafarig? They're going to be bringing in a Quagsire, and I'm not baiting. I'm going straight for the Trailblaze here. Do they respect the damage? They do not. Double super effective, taking the KO, and that is a good game. We get a very bad lead in the next match, Wigglytuff into Colossal. I believe this was the first lead that we saw in this video. I save switch into Oranguru, and my opponent is not switching out, so I'm more than happy to fire off the Trailblaze. Let's start getting some damage on Colossal. Colossal gonna chip me even more as they actually fire off a charge stack, but I'm more than happy to let this go. Rock Slide lands, in comes Lurantis. I wonder if this is the same trainer that I played in the first battle. I had a huge run with this team, ending just shy of 3,000 ELO, and in the 2900s, throughout the course of 25 battles, sometimes you will end up rematching people. So in this case, it looks like this might be a rematch of my Game 1 opponent, and they are playing it quite a bit differently. This time, they're not saving the Lurantis for the back, they're using it in the mid-game. I do get a nice farm down with Wigglytuff, and I'm looking to send in Girafarig. Girafarig is answered with the Bubble Ludicolo, and the bubbles add up so much in this matchup. Good timing would be throwing 2 Confusions in the move. However, I need to start ramping up my damage as quickly as possible, so I end up throwing on slightly suboptimal timing and throw 1 in the Trailblaze. Trailblaze does get shielded. Oh my, it looks like Girafarig can farm down. I'm putting up the shield on the Weather Ball. Girafarig looking for that full farm down, and now I get to exit with so much energy. In comes Colossal. I fire off the Psychic Fangs. This is a boosted Psychic Fangs. Colossal puts up the shield just for Girafarig to make it to the Trailblaze. So we get another Girafarig sweep against this team as Trailblaze KOs Colossal. Hopping to the final match, leading Wigglytuff into Shadow Pidgeot. This is an incredibly cool lead. Anytime I see Shadow Pidgeot, I assume there's going to be Mud Boys in the back. and if there's mud boys in the back, then I'm more than happy to stay in and play this out with Wigglytuff, because I have 2 trailblaze users in the back. My opponent fires off the air cutter, I immediately return fire with the icy wind, and then I'll switch into the Oranguru. They end up no shielding, in comes Shadow Quagsire, and I respond with the Oranguru. So it is the mud boy in the back that we were expecting. Oranguru no shields the Aqua Tail that does do some pretty substantial damage, and I'm going to be immediately spamming out the Trailblaze. Let's ramp up our confusions and make this matchup as uncomfortable as possible for the Quagsire. Quagsire will make a last second Aqua Tail, and I'm just going to be letting this go. I'm more than happy just to take the shield advantage for Girafarig. Girafarig looking for a full farm down. My opponent pivots. They send in Obstagoon as their final Pokemon. And this is where saving Wigglytuff from earlier is going to win me this game. I get big damage with Trailblaze. I now go for the Psychic Fangs. Even if they don't shield this is going to set up an easy Charm farm down for the Wigglytuff. But they do end up shielding the double resistant Psychic Fangs. I get the full farm down with Wigglytuff, and we get the Swift as well. So we're going to get a 2 shield flex to end out this video as Swift KOs the Quagsire. And I believe the footage continues on for just a little bit here to show that it was a 5-0 set to end it. All in all, I ended up having really good results with this team. A few of my Discord members tried it, and they had very favorable results with it as well. Shadow Girafarig is just an absolute terror as a closer. And realistically, the only way that you're going to be able to wall off confusion in this meta is with Steel or Dark primarily. I did end up seeing a Ferrothorn or two. There was one game against the Ferrothorn where I actually ended up managing to tie, and then a second game against the Ferrothorn where tragically I was in a winning position, and then I had a game bug where just my charge moves suddenly were not pressable, and so I had a Psychic Fangs that I could have thrown to knock out the Ferrothorn, and then my game just didn't respond, and then I ended up losing the game as a result of it. So that was pretty unfortunate. But I would say realistically, the main bad matchups that you could see with this team are Oranguru and Ferrothorn, but I think both are playable as long as you're very mindful about where you use your shields. Shadow Girafarig, it's a Pokemon that I do really enjoy. And I really feel like it went under the radar with the Confusion buff last season because Giraffrig doesn't really see a lot of open Great League play, but in these limited metas where the power level is a lot lower, then Giraffrig can be quite fun. Now, to the big scandal of the video, I did use a team with Wigglytuff. I don't really like Wigglytuff. I don't care for it, and man, after using it, I don't think I'll be using it again for a very long time, but to me, it was more of a means to an end, where if I wanted to use Shadow Girafarig and really unlock its full potential, I felt like Wigglytuff had to be on the team just to shut down Furret, because that's a matchup where Girafarig really struggles, because Sucker Punch just absolutely deletes it. So, to atone for the sins of using Wigglytuff for a video, I think Monday's video tomorrow will end up being a fun shoutcast, and I think we'll put Shadow, Shiny, Ursaluna, and Go-Go together, which is pretty much the furthest thing away from Wigglytuff that is possible in this meta. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.